Hey, I'm Kim Santini. Welcome back to my studio, The Magic Space. I'm here today with another art journaling lesson for you. Today I'm going to show you how to make a new moon gratitude page. So settle in, gather some materials, and come and journal with me. All right, so I've got some materials set up. This is what you're going to need for today. You're going to want a journal. I have chosen to work in my Dina Wakley journal. It's a mixed media journal and it's made by Ranger, and the pages are all different types of paper. So I have chosen a plain page to work on, but you could do this exercise on a page that already has some marks if you wish. So I've got my journal here. I have a watercolor set. You want a watercolor set that is going to have a really dark value in it. And I chose this one because it's got a really nice glimmery dark black, and I can get a nice navy or dense purple with some of these colors. I also have a metallic paint. You don't have to use metallic. If you have yellow or white, you can substitute. You could even use gesso if you would like. I have off camera, I have a little cup with some water in it and a paper towel. I have a pencil here. I have a stencil, a circular stencil. You don't have to have a stencil. You can freehand the circles if you wish, or you can scour your house and use something like a bottle cap or some small item that you can find, maybe the end of a candle, because you are going to want to be able to make some circles. I have two different size brushes. I have a larger brush that I'm going to use with my watercolors, and then I have a smaller brush for use with metallic paint. And then also off camera, I have a paper plate for squirting this metallic paint onto. All right, you ready to get started? So this is called a gratitude bomb. And like I mentioned before, it's an adaptation of creative exercise that I first learned of in a podcast. But the idea is that we're going to spend some time with the things that we're grateful for. Grateful of people that we are grateful to have crossed paths with in our lives, as well as experiences. So the first thing that I want you to do is get your journal and your pencil and sit with your journal and spend some time thinking about the people that you are grateful for in your life. And I want you to start writing their names down. Now, the tactic or the strategy that I'm going to use when I begin to write is called spilling. And spilling is kind of a stream of consciousness exercise where you just hold your tool and you begin to write from left to right in your book, and you fill the page, and there's no grammar, there's no punctuation, there's no what's it called, apostrophes. You know, if you run out of space at the end of the line, just lift your pencil up and start again. It doesn't matter if words spill from one row to the next. It doesn't matter if your handwriting is legible. It's really just a practice or a way of allowing the names as they come to you to just get directly onto the page. So I'm going to sit in a comfortable spot with my book, and I am going to fill this whole page with the names of people that I'm grateful for. And if you want to, you can set a timer for this. The original exercise allocated a minute for this part of the practice. But for me, I have a big page here. This is about, I think this is a 12 by 8 or maybe 14 by 8 page, and I'm not sure that a minute will be enough for me to fill it. So if you feel that you need to set a timer in order to get the most out of this practice, please go ahead and do so, and give yourself an adequate amount of time so that you don't feel rushed. And if you don't want to set a timer, if you really want to sit and savor this diving into the people that you are grateful for, then go ahead and do that. All right? Okay, so you can see I've got my whole page filled here. And really what I did, my attack was to start from my earliest memories and work my way through my life and list out people that impacted me in a certain way. So there really wasn't any sense to it. And at the very end, when I got to the bottom of the page, I also added a phrase, and anyone who paused my heart in some capacity to grab the moment. So I feel like this maybe isn't a completely comprehensive list, but it's a really great start. And I feel really loved at this moment after sitting inside the love from all of these different people. So now we're going to move on to the next step of this exercise. And what you're going to do is you're going to flip your journal over. Okay, so you're going to flip your journal over. And the next part or the next piece of this is that you are going to repeat the spilling exercise, but instead of focusing on the people you love, I want you to focus on the memories you have, things that you cherish that made you feel loved or gave you the opportunity to throw love out into the world. You're just going to write it right over top of the words that are already here. Again, this exercise is not meant to result in anything that you can read per se or go back and visit and reread. It's more an exercise of sitting in the space of recalling, remembering, remarking, and putting down in a space these people and these circumstances that made us feel loved. Again, if you want to set a timer, go ahead. I am just going to allow myself to continue to sit in my comfy chair with this book, and my goal is to fill this page. If I still feel like I have more things that are important enough to put down, I can always rotate my book again in a different direction and begin writing in another direction across the marks that are already here on the page. So take as much time as you feel that you need to really indulge and sit and baste with these memories. All right? So you can see that the page has really changed. It's not legible any longer. And that's part of the beauty of this practice or what we've just created. The energy in these marks that are here in my book, they don't necessarily spell out anything specific to me, but when I sit and look at this page in the future, what it's going to do is remind me of the clarity and the love and the beauty that I felt as I was making these marks down. And another wonderful thing about this sort of an exercise when you spill and continue to mark on a page until the words that you've written are no longer legible is that the experience itself can grow to encompass experiences or memories or people that you've encountered after this page was created. It's more of a representation of the feeling of how these people and opportunities made us or filled us up. So I'm going to reorient my book the correct way. So this is the top of my page. And now what I want to do is I want to put a mark over top of this page, or I want to somehow put a symbol on here that represents the passage of time, that encompasses the cycle of people coming and going in our lives, of experiences coming and going, the road ahead of us, the road behind us, that sort of thing. And for me, I have lately been really obsessed with the moon. And I came across this beautiful lunar calendar. And I plan to have this framed and hung in my studio. But meanwhile, I thought, I'm going to take a piece of this. I'm going to take inspiration from the way the moon phases are depicted on this calendar, and I'm going to set that over top of what I've just written here. And so what I'm first going to do is I'm going to create a wash with a dark watercolor, and I am going to I think I want my lunar calendar to sit right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a wash in that same space, and I'm going to let it sort of drip down the page. So you want to get your watercolor. Get your watercolor tray here. Let me shift things a little bit. Get your watercolor tray out in your larger brush. I like to use a larger brush because That allows me to fill the space more quickly, and it also gives me more generous marks. And what I'm going to also do is, whatever side is your dominant side or your dominant hand, you want your water cup to be on that side. And you also want to have a little paper towel in case you need to clean up. So I'm going to dip my brush in the water, and I'm going to start to activate this paint here. I'm going to pull some of this paint out, and I'm going to put it in one of these trays over here. I'm going to try to wipe some of that color off, and I'll actually start my mark here. Now you can start your watercolor marks however you wish. You can mask off an area, you can get it wet ahead of time and work wet and wet. I think what I want is a crisp edge sort of at the top of the page or top of the mark that extends almost all the way across. And I'm just gonna let it gradually or gently bleed down. And I don't want my sky to be all dark. So I'm also going to pick up some purple. Now, one of the beautiful things about watercolor is that, your pigment is suspended in water, but the more pigment you have, the darker your mark. The more water you have, the lighter your mark. So you can really play with the combination of things, the different ratios, and layer your colors and get some beautiful effects. If I wanted a really flat, opaque coverage here, as opposed to this watery surface that I've got with the watercolors, I would choose a different paint. I would use acrylic paints because they have a bit more opacity. But the watercolor paints are see-through, so I can still see my words under here, as well as see the way the darker black paint blends into that purple, which actually feels like a pink on my page. I'm going to add a little bit of blue to that. Now, the other thing that watercolor paint tends to do is it's water thirsty, so it's going to move to where the water is. It doesn't necessarily stay put or exactly where you place it on the page. It will travel with the water. I'm just going to put a little bit more blue here. And I really want this area, to be dark up here. And I don't think I've gotten it quite dark enough. So let me go in with some more dark. There we go. Because I'm going to put my moons over top of this, and they're not going to be as visually, without contrast, they're not going to jump off the page. So you'll notice that my marks with my brush, I'm no longer sweeping the color on it, I'm kind of dabbing it. I'm doing that because I'm realizing that my page, the fibers of my page, are a little delicate, and I don't want to tear the page apart. So I'm just going to dab, and I'm going to let the paint kind of move. I'm not a watercolorist by any means. I appreciate in the media very much, but I'm not an expert on how to handle it or manage it. I sort of let it just do its own thing. All right. So I'm going to now let this dry, and then I will come in with the final layer of marks. So my watercolor has dried, and perhaps you can see that the sheen on this is really pretty remarkable. It makes me very happy. I did use a blow dryer to help it along a little bit because I'm impatient that way. But then the next thing we want to do is, once your page is dry, you want to bring your stencil in place, or your circle. And the lunar calendar that I want to depict, let me bring this back here. I want to use 5 phases of the moon. I want to start with the new moon and then go into the quarter, the full, the other quarter. This would be the last and the first, and then the full again. So I'm choosing to put 5 circles representing the moon in the space that I have painted. Now, keep in mind, I want to remind everybody that when I present a journaling lesson, it's really not about mirroring or mimicking exactly what I'm doing, but taking these ideas and translating them into things that are more meaningful to you. Maybe you just want to put a full moon on here. Maybe you want to put a specific constellation that's meaningful. Maybe you have something else altogether that you're putting on your page. So, I want to embrace or encourage you to alter this approach so that it is as significant as possible for yourself. So I have this little stencil here, or stencil pattern here, and what I want to do is find a shape that's going to allow me to get 5 circles across the page. And I think that this is probably the best candidate for that. So I'm going to use a pencil to trace around this, and I'm thinking that I may not be able to see it very well. If your paper is still wet when you do this, you may actually rip your paper. So, keep in mind that you want to, you really want that page to be dry for the best sort of experience. And I'm just eyeballing it, although you could very carefully measure it out if that's important to you. I like things that appear to be handmade, that are obviously handmade. That appeals to me very much. So I'm just going to move this over here and give myself another one. And again, you can use bottle caps, you can freehand your circles. It's really not imperative that you have a stencil or that they even be perfect. Okay. So now I'm going to bring this paper plate. This is just what a great surface for me as far as a palette goes. I'm going to squeeze a little bit of this craft paint on here. This is a Martha Stewart craft paint. It's nice and opaque. You can use really any sort of paint you wish, any sort of color. I'm kind of sticking with my metallic theme that I love here and going with this metallic copper. And I have a smaller brush, and I'm going to start by just loading my brush up, and I am going to begin to paint this moon. The middle moon is my full moon, and so I want this one to be completely painted. I'm painting right up to the pencil line, but you can paint over top of it if that line is bothersome to you, or you could even remove it with an eraser afterwards. And another idea that just came to me was actually looking at a photo of the moon and putting some of the crater patterns, like painting a representational version of the moon in your book instead of just a flat circle. So the last quarter of the moon, or no, the first quarter is going to go right here. And I'm eyeballing the center of my circle. I just painted that line in. And now I'm going to complete painting this half circle bit here. And you can get a smaller brush if you wish. Depending on the size of your circles. Right? Okay. And I'm going to do the reverse, the same thing over here, but in reverse. Now I could have put my moons in first and then watercolored over them later. Or I could have drawn them in and watercolored around them. I chose to put the watercolor down as a gentle wash on its own without having to worry about any edges, to sort of go with the meditative flow of the writing practice that we started out with. But there's lots of different ways that you could achieve this sort of a result. And you could also adapt it with completely different materials altogether. Now, my new moons are not visible here, or not as clearly visible as these coppery ones. And so I have gone and I've grabbed a really skinny brush. This is called a liner brush. You don't necessarily need it, but I realized, and I'm going to move this plate out of the way so I can get in here closer. I realized that it will give me a line, a thin line that I'm much happier with. I'm using my non-dominant hand as a brace. Really helps me to get a steadier mark. And I'm only loading paint up on the very tip of my brush, which also helps me to control the type of mark that I'm going to get. A brush that's super heavy with paint doesn't really have a whole lot of control for me. I like it. I like to have just a little bit of paint on the end there. And I globbed a little bit. My line's not perfectly even, but that's okay. I'm going to be kind with myself. Now, my original plan wasn't to complete the circle on these quarter moons, but I feel like it kind of needs to be there. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do that. It's up to you. Again, you can adapt this however you wish. And if you don't have metallic paint, you could use white, silver. Well, I guess silver is probably metallic, right? Yellow. Really any color you wish. Because it's your page and it's your journal and you get to make the rules. Nobody is going to tell you that this is right or wrong. Because this also isn't like hanging over your couch, right? This is going to sit in your journal for your eyes to look at, for your heart to remember. All right. I'm going to put my brush that has the acrylic paint in it in the water. I really don't want this liner brush to dry out, and I also don't want it to sit in the water, so I'm going to clean it right away. If I let it sit in the water, because it has such a delicate tip, it will get damaged or squished. And there you have it. This is my new moon gratitude page. I really enjoyed making this and sharing the process with you. And I hope that you get as much enjoyment and satisfaction and a sense of being loved and significant as I did while you create your own. Thanks so much for journaling with me.